Partnerships are vital to our global outreach, enabling us to take the love and hope of Jesus Christ to those who need it most. Our Boots on the Ground Partnership Program physically ministers to those in desperate situations all over the world. The Israel Partnership furthers Kim's legacy of outreach to Israel and Jewish people worldwide. We invite you to become a partner today. Join us today and be part of a community that inspires hope, brings restoration to life, and often healing from the past. Together, we can make a difference, and we thank you for your ongoing support.
Hello and welcome to Real Life, Real Faith. I am joined, as always, by Pastor Far, and we have an amazing guest with us today, Dr. Vicky Tim, who has been with us for the last number of weeks, and she's joining us from South Africa. Dr. Tim is a clinical psychologist. She has got a PhD in it, and she studied for 10 years to get all the letters after her name. And she's an absolutely brilliant woman, and I've known her since I was very young, and it has been an absolute honor to have her be part of the last number of Real Life, Real Faith shows that we've done. And we've had a great time talking here in between ourselves and amongst ourselves, and we've really tackled a couple of difficult, I think, and taboo sort of based topics. But today, you know, Pastor Far, we've spoken a couple of times together about grief and that kind of thing. And we've had a lot of people write in and ask us about that, about grief and about trauma. So I just thought, you know, one of the things that I'd like to sort of try and do while we've got Dr. Tim with us is just kind of ask from a practical perspective, because a lot of us know the scriptures. We know, especially for people that are saved, we know that if you know, a tragedy occurs, death occurs, we know that heaven is there and it's waiting for us on the other side. But what I really wanted to ask Dr. Tim is how it is, what do you do, what techniques or what kind of, you know, talking points do you give to people who are trying to process the reality of grief?
I think that is, you've just used the word process, and I think that's exactly what grieving is about. It's processing, it's sitting with those painful emotions, which of course sometimes people don't think that's faith-based. Because, you know, your person has gone to a happier, better place, which of course we know they have if they're born again. But we're still sitting with the reality of the loss.
Yes.
And that is sitting with somebody, talking doesn't have to be a professional, although that can be useful, especially if you have complicated grief or grief that's out of time. You know, people grieve in different ways. And we react differently depending on the different circumstances around the grief, what actually happened. But basically it's processing, and it's trying to get, you know, your emotions, your feelings around this, not expecting too much of yourself, not avoiding those feelings, but trying to get that balance between grieving and moving on. When I say moving on, it's getting on with life in a way that you can pull things in that are still enjoyable. You still might enjoy visiting friends. Looking for your support system around you is important, of course, at that point in time as well. But it's trying to get that balance, allowing yourself to process while at the same time then giving yourself the permission to also enjoy certain things in life as well. And trying to get that balance right. And everybody goes at a different pace. So it's no use saying, okay, but it's 3 months now, you should be over it. I think we always grieve the person that we've lost. We adjust to it and we learn to become functional and enjoy life again. But there's always that time when those pangs of grief can come back.
Yeah.
Something like an anniversary, something that you are then reminded of that loss. And that's okay. You're a person, you're a human being, you've lost somebody, you know, so that's always going to be with you. And I think people expect themselves to kind of get over it, move on. And yeah, that's the reality, is that we adjust to it.
I think that's incredibly well said. You know, that the reality is that we adjust to it, and also not being so hard on ourselves. I know, I mean, I've been pretty open on the show. You know, I know that there was a period of time where I was very harsh with people that had lost somebody because I hadn't experienced that degree of loss until Kim. I didn't know what it felt like to lose somebody that meant that much to me. It really did feel like losing not only a parent figure, but somebody that had changed my whole life. And I've explained it before, but, you know, it felt like, especially at the time that he got sick, it had felt like my life was at the ultimate peak. It felt like I was on top, like I just conquered Mount Everest, you know. And he was talking to me, you know, there were plans for me to move to Israel, and we were looking at apartments, and I was going to spend half my time in Israel and Jerusalem and half my time in Los Angeles. And it just felt like life couldn't get any better. And losing him, it felt like a bullet train went through my soul. And I stopped functioning altogether for years. I couldn't say his name. If somebody brought him up, I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't watch his memorial. If I heard his voice come on, I had to turn it off. And I realized firstly in that moment how unbelievably judgmental I had been. And I really repented, not only to God, but to the people that I'd been judgmental to. You know, because I had thought, oh, well, sort of, you know, you quote your scriptures and you get over it. You know, you know that they're in heaven, so why does it matter? And I was definitely harsh in my interpretation of well, they've gone to a better place, and I was also harsh in my attempt at kindness. I failed dismally at that. And after that grief train, is what I call it, struck my soul, I suddenly had a lot of compassion and understanding and empathy for other people who've lost, you know, close people to them. And there are moments, like Dr. Timm just said, you know, even now with everything that's been going on in the world, there's been this sort of resurgence of just really missing Kim. You know, Pastor Farr and I were talking about it, like, I just wish I could talk to him. Yeah. I just wish I could sit down with him at a fire pit once more and have him cook me steak that he's never going to eat, and have him eat his little piece of salmon and half a piece of fruit, and, you know, make me steak with his favorite sauce, and just sit and talk, you know. And I can talk about it now without falling apart, but the pain in my heart is very much still there. And I didn't know it was possible to still miss somebody all these years later. And I'm just, again, speaking very openly and honestly. I can be honest, I've carried a lot of guilt about that, because it's like, oh, well, it's been all these years, you know. He left us, he got sick on the 7th of September 2015, and he graduated into glory on the 23rd of November 2016. It's been quite a long time, but I still definitely feel that pain. And I know we've had people write in, and I think one of the topics that people brought up is, which seems to be at least one of the most difficult types of grief to try and work through, is the loss of a child.
Oh, yes. Wow.
Yeah, there's, for sure, that is one of the, you know, just as you was explaining your, just to go back to that, when you're explaining your grief around Kim, there's also different types of grief. It's not just the loss of a person, it's also the loss of the kind of vision that you had of what your goals, your dreams. This was going to happen together.
Yes, it was late.
Yeah, so then there's that grief as well. So there's different types of grief, not just the loss of a person, but often it's with that person as well, all of the different kinds of things that are lost with them as well, like what we were going to do together.
Yes.
Your dreams, your hopes.
It's the future.
Yeah. But yes, when somebody dies out of time, and especially with a child, then that's particularly difficult to process, and people need support. There's a lot of support in South Africa, and I'm sure there is here as well, in terms of places that you can go to with other grieving parents.
And you think that's important?
Yeah, because it's somebody who understands, it's somebody who's gone through that as well. So that support system, like with addicts, it's important for them to get in with other people who are walking the same journey, like peers, as well as professionals. That's also useful in grief, especially with something like losing a child, that you then get with other parents, and you've got a support system, a support network of somebody else who actually understands what it is that you're going through.
Support system,
Support system.
so important,
Very.
so vital.
Yeah.
And I think too, you know, like what would Kim expect? Well, he and the Lord both, of course, wouldn't want us to get sick over it, wouldn't want us to diminish in that sense. But, you know, I just keep thinking, Christy, we must carry the vision. It's like we have that purpose that we'll never get over it, but we get through it. Yeah. And carrying the vision is just an example of, you know, it's what he lived for, and it's like, well, it's going to continue to live.
Yeah, exactly.
What you've explained there is you've adjusted to it, and there's also still meaning, because that purpose is carried forward. And that we're creatures of meaning. We need to understand, we need to have a purpose. Yeah. And that purpose still is there, even though he is in heaven. Yes. His purpose here is still continuing in this ministry.
Yeah. And what if people say to you, why? I mean, that seems to be the big question we all ask is why, you know, and how. But why? In this case, it's why. But I mean, how can you encourage someone that's just stuck on the why? You know, how could they leave us so soon, or it was so unexpected?
And that what you can do is somebody's come alongside them and mourn that with them, because there aren't those ultimate answers. We don't know why. We see through a glass darkly. Yeah. So we don't actually understand now.
Come alongside. I love that you said that.
I love it too.
Yeah.
I love it too. And I think the other thing, and again, this is just me speaking from experience, the more grief I felt, the more isolated I became. Because I was around a bunch of people who knew of Kim, but they didn't know him the way I did. And even though my mom did, you know, I lived with him. I kind of became the 11th child in a way. And, you know, we obviously lost them. And I remember when I finally got to see Jane and the family in 2017, it had been a couple of years. And I mean, I was completely inconsolable. Yeah. But when just seeing her and, you know, sort of being there with people that I knew felt it the way I did. Like you're saying, it was a coming alongside. It's not like we had these massive discussions about it. It actually wasn't. I'd gone to see a grief therapist in South Africa. She really helped me. Her name was Natalie. She was a phenomenal psychologist, and she really, really helped me. She was the only person I could speak to about anything. Everybody else, I was like, I can't talk about it. But just in seeing Jane and the family again after this number of years, it was, you're talking about coming alongside. All she said is, I know. And I knew she did know. She said, I know, Doris. She had obviously processed it with the kids more than, you know, I was kind of on my own a lot in South Africa at that time, and I obviously had a terrible pregnancy and was going through a rough time. But just having her there and seeing the kids and one after the other sort of hugging them and sobbing, and her just saying, I know. I knew she did know. And there's that coming alongside. We didn't come up with answers together. It was just the sense of, I'm not by myself. And I think the enemy uses grief to cause intense isolation, which causes us to remove ourselves from community, because it can feel more isolating when you're around people that you know aren't understanding the way you are. Right. They're not feeling the way you are. So I love what Dr. Timm said about, you know, we've had a couple of people write into us about the loss of a child, and I don't know what that feels like. You know, God willing, I never will. I don't know that feeling, but there are people who tragically do. And so getting into support groups is so important. Finding people that have had the type of grief you've had. Dr. Timm was saying there's different types of grief. Finding people who have walked the path of grief that you have, I think is such an important thing as well, finding these groups, I would assume.
Yeah, because that what you were talking, like somebody just saying, well, Jane saying to you, I know. Yes. I mean, you know that this person knows without they having to say something about it. So it's that even if you're sitting just having coffee talking about the weather, you both know. Yes. So there's that kind of support system.
I think what's so important too is that for me, the first thing, my knee-jerk feeling is, I don't want to visit with the person because I don't know what to say. And in reality, they really need us but not words. Words are inadequate.
Yeah.
And you said that, Chrissy. It's like, it's not in what we say, it's the fact that we are there.
Yes.
And I have to remind myself, because I'm always so afraid, because I don't want to say the wrong thing,
Yeah.
or I don't feel like my word is going to be adequate. But they're not looking for a
Words.
sermon or a word,
yeah.
right? There's
No.
no words that could.
You can't fix,
Yeah.
you know, so you can only be with the person. And
But
it's
your
taking
presence.
the cue,
Yes.
and taking the cue from them. If they want to talk about it, they will talk about it. And then really what we can do is listen. That is important in terms of supporting somebody through grief.
I also think this is something that, and I'll close with this, something the Jews do, which I love, is a beautiful sense of community, is that when somebody does pass away, they sit shiva, which basically is 7 days of the family being in mourning and the community coming to their house, and they just sit. They bring food and they sit. It's called sitting shiva. The whole day and night for a week, people come and go from the house and they just sit with the family.
Beautiful.
Somebody cleans, somebody cooks,
That's
there's
healing.
food everywhere. Nobody, if they want to talk, they talk. Some people are crying, some people aren't. Sometimes the guys will want to go sit out back and, sit and have coffee together. Sometimes the women are just come cook with me. Sometimes they're just sitting, but there's people surrounding the family that have lost someone. And I think it's a beautiful sense of community.
It's powerful.
There's an evidence, I believe, of the heart of God in that. And I also think that that's something that we as a church, as a group of people, regardless of denomination, it's something we can learn from. Because like you're saying, Pastor Farr, I too, before I experienced this level of grief, didn't really want to go around because I felt like inadequate and I didn't know what to say. And it's something I actually learned from my dad. He was amazing. The second somebody was ill or somebody died, he'd get in the car and he'd drive there and he'd just sit with them.
Oh.
And he would cry and he would give out tissues and he would wander around and make sure everything was okay, ask if he could do anything to help. Otherwise, he'd just sit. And I watched him do that for people he knew and people he didn't know. But he was just there. And I think that's something that's so important for everybody, whether you've gone through a loss and maybe have felt guilty that it's taken you a substantial amount of time and you feel like you're not over it. Being perfectly transparent, it's been 8 years. There's still days I cry about Kim. There's still days I genuinely cry on my own and I miss him so terribly. But it's like Dr. Timm said, it's the learning to adjust. It's the remembering, but it's the learning to adjust and also trying to remind ourselves there's still purpose in here somewhere. So I know it's a little bit of a heavier topic, but because a number of you wrote in, we want to be able to be here to support you. If there's any questions that you have in particular, please email us, realliferealfaith@houseofdestiny.org. If there's any emails you'd like to send to Dr. Timm specifically, I can make sure she gets those. And she is incredible like this and will respond to you, and I will be able to send that response through that email address. So again, it's realliferealfaith@houseofdestiny.org. And let me encourage you, if you missed them, go back and watch the last 3 weeks of Real Life, Real Faith, because we did have Dr. Timm on here with us, and she's been absolutely amazing. We're so grateful for you coming on and sharing some of your knowledge with us. So we thank you. To everybody out there watching, make sure you tune in every week and make sure you keep up to date with everything else we're doing at the House of Destiny. Mondays, we've got Prophetic Rewind, where Donna goes back in time and shows people things that Kim prophesied. Now is a crazy time to be watching that. Tuesdays, we've got Real Life, Real Faith. Wednesdays, we've got Pastor Farr doing amazing teachings with our online church. Every second Thursday, we've got Charlie Jordan with Perspectives of the Prophetic, where also he was right by Kim for 30 years, and he's got some amazing insight and things to say. Every Friday, Israel Update. You've got Doobie and I talking to you about what's going on. On Saturdays, we've got our main broadcast, for the month of July. Donna and I did a Code Breakers special, and, even if it's a little bit later and further on past that, I still encourage you to go back and watch it. And then on Sundays, we've got Donna doing Code Breakers Live. So every week there's something going on at the House of Destiny, and we encourage you to stay tuned with all of it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Again, that's real-faith.tv. One of the things that we're promised about heaven is complete satisfaction. Being in the presence of Jesus at all times when he is the only true bringer of satisfaction, because those things don't come the way we think they do.
If you find yourself in a season where you feel like your colors have faded, there is a moment in time where the flamingo gets the color back. So be encouraged that after a season of giving, there is a time of reaping.
The reality is that he is at work, but he's always a step or several steps ahead. And when we can have just a moment where we forget about ourselves for just a moment, inevitably we always realize there he is. He's always wanting not just to knock on our heart's door, but he wants to come in. He wants to sup with us.
You ask and we listen. We're finally bringing the most requested offer ever. Get the queen size premium MyPillow, now only $19.98. MyPillow is made with patented adjustable fill. It adjusts to your exact individual needs regardless of your sleep position. It helps keep your neck aligned and holds its shape all night long so you get the best sleep of your life. But that's not all. Get our 6-piece kitchen or bath towel sets only $25. Our brand new mattress topper as low as $69.98. Get our famous MyPillow bed sheets for as low as $25 and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get huge discounts on all MyPillow products, including the premium queen size MyPillow, only $19.98. That's the lowest price ever. Don't delay, order today. From all of us here at MyPillow, thanks America!
We here at the House of Destiny are partnering with you to let our viewers, of course, know about your company. It's Beverly Hills Precious Metal.
Andrew, explain how that works.
So I'll walk you through it right now. So if you go to BHPM.com, right there on the homepage, you'll see a form that you could fill out. And that form is very important in letting us know how we can help you. So you just put in your first name, last name, email address, phone number. There's a section that says, how did you hear about us? And in there, put Kim Clement. And then there's a portion where you could write a couple of notes down on the bottom. Usually within about 24 to 48 hours, we'll contact you by phone call, and then we'll go over everything with you. This isn't a high pressure deal. We always recommend that if you feel uncomfortable, take a step back, pray about it. You will gain the answers that you need by doing that, and come back to us when you're comfortable.